Hi there, this is the first part for the 13th lecture on Life and Death in East Asia presented by Sumio Umekawa with my old picture. This is when we celebrated the 5th year of my son and 3rd year of my daughter. The 13th lecture is about the unification of thoughts, in which I will take Sangai Ishinki as an example. The lecture consisted of 3 movies as usual, of which first one is about the background of the article. In the second part, we will check the thoughts in the article, and in the final third one, I will introduce you the growth of embryo represented and spread through this particular article. In this first movie, firstly, we will check the publication data of Sangai Shinki, which will be followed by the study on something called Shingaku, which is a Japanese unified style of Confucianism. The compilation and publication of Sangai Ishinki is rather mysterious. According to the colophon, the original text was compiled in 1317. It says that the 1317 version was a unification of 2 editions, Sangai Ishinki as well as Sangai Ishinki with pictures. The unification was done by a monk called Dairyu, and for the edition with pictures, some additional explanation was made by Haruya Igetsu, and the picture was drawn by Matsukawa Hanza and published in 1849. So it is quite impossible for Dairyu to unify the Sangai Ishinki and the edition with picture in 1317 because the version with picture was published much later. And currently, we have 4 editions or versions published in 1649, which can be the earliest extant at the moment. Each text was preserved in Keio University, Waseda University, Tohoku University, and Ishikawa Prefecture. According to Nakamura Kazuki, the unification of 2 editions might have been done in 1649 by Dairyu because 1649 version is the earliest extant at the moment. But in that case, the original Sangai Ishinki was written in 1314, and we wonder what was unified together with Sangai Ishinki of 1317 version. It is more complicated, though, if you read the appendix by Haruya Igetsu in Sangai Ishinki with pictures. He said, Dairyu at Daitokuji in Shino in Rakuhoku compiled during Meiriki era. The meaning of Sangai Ishin is a great indication of unification of 3 wisdoms. This compilation through the year is to invite people to the good way, which has been in the public for a long time. Therefore, in accordance to Haruya, Dairyu unified 2 editions sometimes between 1655 to 1658, which is much later than 1649, of course. So if Haruya was right, then who compiled 1649 edition, which is earlier than Meiriki era? Haruya further said, thus the phrase has been well known by people, but his theory, meaning Dairyu's theory, rather inclined to Buddhism as well as I Ching, which means the Book of Change. Therefore, the value of the unification of 3 teachings is scarce. My master, Kamikawa Kisui, regretted the scarceness of unification of thoughts and started correcting, although he passed away in the middle. So, in accordance to this appendix, before Haruya added explanation, Kamikawa Kisui had changed and added some parts. So, Muraoka Ku suggests, on the basis of Haruya's statements, Dairyu edited Sangai Ishinki during Meiriki era, on which Kawakami Kisui put corrections and added explanations. For Kamikawa's version, Haruya further added comments to compile with picture version. If we follow this assumption, 1649 version should have been the one Dairyu used to compile Sangai Ishinki. As we do not know when Dairyu was active, we have no way to know if the 1964 version was edited by Dairyu or if it was a prototyped one which Dairyu edited on during Meiriki era. Anyway, it seems concrete that a monk called Dairyu was involved in the editing of Sangai Ishinki, and Kamikawa, Haruya, and Matsukawa were involved in the edition of that with pictures. Sangai Ishinki is very often discussed in relation with Tachikawa-ism as a social movement, but in addition to it, we can find the ideologies and concepts of something called Shingaku. Shingaku was founded by Ishida Baigan, based on Chuzi school Confucianism. He said to think about using all the things, including Confucianism, Buddhism, Laozi, and Chuanzi, for analyzation of this country. In a sense, Shingaku itself was a school to unify several different sorts. And indeed, Kamikawa Kisui, mentioned as a first commentator for Sangai Ishinki Zukai, was one of the scholars of Shingaku Confucian school. This might have been why he found Dairyu's edition a bit unsatisfactory, with too much inclination onto Buddhism and the idea of the Book of Change. In addition to these circumstances, another name for Sangai Ishinki, Sanken Ichisho, meaning the unification of three wisdoms, suggests the article could have been a text coming from Shingaku school. At least since the involvement of Kamikawa Kisui, it was most certainly regarded as the article related with this particular school. Indeed, observing and considering things from many different approaches had started much earlier than the emergence of Shingaku school. For instance, we can find a similar tendency in the medieval literary tradition called Gozan literature, which had flourished from the end of Kamakura period to the early Edo period. Gozan literature, mainly led by Rinzai Zen monks, attempted to find similarities between Rinzai Zen thoughts and Confucian thoughts. As many Confucian scholars were not convinced by Rinzai Zen monks, Rinzai Zen monks started to adapt the idea of unification of three teachings popular in Chinese Neo-Confucianism. Taking such literary dynamism in account, the underlying foundation of Shingaku could be sought for in Gozan literature. Anyway, in the case of China, three teachings indicate Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. However, in the case of Japan, especially in the case of Shingaku school, Confucian thoughts was greatly represented by the idea of Book of Change. Also, concepts of Shintoism were sometimes mixed up with those of Buddhism. Moreover, we find the teachings called Michi or Do very often without knowing what it specifies. Yet sometimes Shintoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism are counted as three teachings. At any rate, three teachings in Japan were not precise and rather vague in comparison with those in China. As having been noted earlier, when it comes to Sangai Ishinki, the article is very often discussed in relation with Tachikawa-ism. Indeed, we can find many phrases or terms familiar with Tachikawa-ism in the text, such as 1 drop of pure water from a father and mother, or 2 drops of red and white. In other words, just as Sanford pointed out in previous lecture, the concept of Tachikawaism existed by sinking in the unified ideas of Shingaku, which became the most popular ideology for the common people during the Edo period. It is said the Sangai Ishinki and Zukai, with pictures, were adapted as main texts in 65 places in Japan and used in 419 Terakoya schools. By the way, texts used at Terakoya school are usually called Oraimono, amongst which there were texts specially compiled for the use of girls. Girls' texts were usually dealing with moralistic, knowledgeable, narrative, social things, sometimes mixed up everything. Some texts were popular because of the writers or painters. For instance, some famous ukiyo-e painters like Hishikawa Moronobu, Suzuki Harunobu, Keisai Eisen often offer the pictures for those texts. Anyway, I repeat that Sangai Ishinki was a text used at Terakoya for children to read aloud. So this is the end of the first part for the 13th lecture. See you in the second part again.